Well, let's get going. So just so everybody knows, I think I need to start off by telling you that I have made a request to the state engineer to designate the Yampa River over appropriated. And so tonight I really want to talk to you about what that means and where we go from here. So let's start out by first understanding what over appropriation means. And over appropriation is a stream system or a stream system is considered over appropriated when at some time or all times of the year, not all the water rights can be met by the water available in the stream system. So what part of the basin, like I said, I've made a request to the state engineer to designate a part of the Yampa River as over appropriated. And I want to show you a map here next that shows what that part is. But before doing that, as you can tell from this slide here, the proposed area is an area upstream of the confluence of the Yampa River and the Little Snake River. The reason for that is we, as many of you know, had administration both 2018 and in 2020. And the calling structure or the calling location where we administer water to was at the Lily Park structures, and the lowest Lily Park structure is located essentially right at the confluence of the Little Snake and the Yampa River. So that's why I've selected that point to be the point where everything upstream of that would be designated over appropriated. And with that, let me show you a map. So this map is a map of Division 6. What you see is either a shaded green, yellow, or kind of a peachy pink color. The green area is right now not considered critical, and as we go through this, I typically use the word over appropriated, but another word we sometimes use is critical or not critical. Not critical, obviously analogous to not over appropriated. So, and you can see that in the map key at the bottom of the screen there, we use the terms critical and not critical. So the green area is not critical and not being considered, but of course that's not the Yampa River. We have the White River, the Green River, and the North Platte in here as well. And then you'll see also that the Little Snake River is not being considered for over appropriation at this time. So the peachy pink areas, the areas that are the areas that are already considered over appropriated, and the yellow area would be what is designated over appropriated if the state engineer confirms my request to designate it over appropriate or recommendation. But I want to dive into this area a little bit more since we're looking at all of Division 6. I wanted to dive into just 3 of my districts. So the main areas we want to look at, just to give you a sense, way at the downstream end, bottom end, or far left of the screen of the District 44 is where the Lily Park structures are located. So we'd be looking at the entire Water District 44, that part of the basin, and then 57 and 58. And those are districts 57 and 58. You can tell from those maps, it's shaded in green. Those are the areas that are already designated over appropriated. And you can tell that Water District 58 almost in its entirety is already designated over appropriated. Those areas, that's obviously, Steamboat Springs upstream, and then the Elk River primarily. Those are the main basins there that comprise of District 58 being over appropriated. Most of District 57 is not over appropriated, and then of course there's a big chunk of District 44. So everything that's not shaded green there, if this designation does occur, would ultimately turn green, if you will, on this map, and would be considered over appropriated. So this is, most of the state already is over appropriated, and I wanted to just show the group here what is considered over appropriated today in the state of Colorado. And that's what this next map shows. This map doesn't show the entire state of Colorado. It's missing a lot of the eastern slope, primarily because the entire eastern slope is over appropriated and has been for decades. What's colored there in the kind of aqua color, if you will, are the areas not considered over appropriated today. And you can see that it's mostly the northwest part of the state and the southwest part of the state, which is Divisions 6 and Division 7. So I want to move now into explaining how over appropriation affects you as water users. And as a surface water right holder or a potentially new surface water right holder, this designation does not affect you. However, if you are a person that's going to be pursuing a new junior appropriation and a new water right on the system, you do need to recognize that whether the system's over appropriated, given that we've had a call on the river, you should be aware that water may not always be available at the time you need it. As a junior water right holder, you would be curtailed in the event of a call with a very junior water right. So, that's surface water rights. More importantly, I think we really need to focus our attention on well permits. If you already have a well permit, this designation will not affect you. The only way it would affect you with an existing well permit is if for some reason you wanted to come in and change that well permit. By way of example, it's a case by case basis here, but by way of example, if your permit only allowed for one, is a residential well permit and it only allowed for one dwelling, and you wanted to add a secondary dwelling unit, this designation could affect you depending on your situation. So really, but more so than any existing well permit, really what's affected here is new well permits and how we go forward with issuing well permits in the future if the basin's designated over appropriated. So let's take a look at this. I've decided that maybe one of the easiest ways to go through the permitting process and give you a sense of how well permits are issued is to show these a couple flow diagrams. And we're going to start out with residential well permits. We also refer to these as exempt, which means they're exempt from administration. So take a minute here and imagine I'm a well permitter in the Denver office. What I do is I issue well permits and recognize I put this in a very simplistic form. The process that our well permitters go through to actually issue a well permit is quite a bit more elaborate than this, and there's quite a larger flow diagram that they deal with, but I wanted to really bring this down into a real small, understandable form for you. So as a well permitter, if I get a well permit application, it's a residential well permit application, the first question I'm going to ask is the basin where this well permit's going to be located over appropriated? And if it's not, then I can issue a well permit for that well application that will allow for up to 3 single-family dwellings, 1 acre lawn and garden irrigation, and then domestic livestock watering. Note also, though, for residential well permit applications, this is also the application you would use just for livestock watering. So if an individual wanted to get a well permit for just livestock watering, and that's all, this is the application you would use. So it's this situation I'm going through is also applicable to livestock watering. Now that scenario I just mentioned is regardless of the lot size. So again, if the basin's not over appropriated, I have a 5-acre lot, I can come and get a well permit for those uses. However, if I have a lot that's 35 acres and the basin now is less than 35 acres and the basin is over appropriated, that's where situations change. Let's first look at, though, however, if my lot is more than 35 acres. Basin's over appropriate, I have a lot more than 35 acres, kind of in that same situation where I can issue a well permit for up to 3 single-family dwellings, 1 acre lawn and garden irrigation, and domestic livestock watering. Where the situation really changes is where you have a lot that's less than 35 acres. In that scenario, a well permit can only be issued for in-house uses. Now, however, if there's a situation where I want uses, me as an applicant of this well permit application wants uses for more than in-house, you can pursue a plan for augmentation or a contract with an entity that has augmentation water available to them. However, in that situation, you would then be pursuing a general purpose well permit, which is where I want to turn to next, is general purpose well permits. And these permits are also known as non-exempt, so they're not exempt from administration. Here we have the same situation. Say I get an application in the Denver office and it's for a general purpose well permit. I'm going to ask the question, is the well going to be located in a basin that's over appropriated or not? If it's not going to be located in a basin that's over appropriated, For the most part, I can issue a well permit for pretty much any use, irrigation, industrial, or even I can plan on digging a pond that intercepts groundwater, and I can get that well permit without any problems, without any further action. However, if your basin becomes is over appropriated, where you want to put your new well is over appropriated, you will then have to pursue an augmentation plan in order to get that well permit. With that said, I think it's important to understand what augmentation means. And to define that, let's first understand that all groundwater is tributary. In the state of Colorado, we assume all groundwater is tributary to the surface water. So in other words, when you pump water from a well, we assume that at some point it is going to deplete and affect the surface waters. So when we say that you're going to have to augment your well, you're going to have to augment your depletions, because we know that pumping water from that well is affecting the surface water. Augmenting in this situation means that you're going to have to replace your depletions with some other source. Often that source is a reservoir or a pond that is decreed for that purpose. The only other way that you can get augmentation water is through dry up of irrigated land. So those are pretty much the two ways to obtain a water source for augmentation. Is either to store water in priority in a pond that is then decreed and can be used to replace your depletions from your well, or you can go through a change of water right and dry up irrigated land and change the use of that water right from, say, irrigation to augmentation. So, you know, why is this so different between surface water rights and well permits? In a situation where we have a senior water right holder whose water rights not being met, say they're being injured by an upstream junior appropriator, as the Division of Water Resources and my water commissioners, they can go up and curtail or shut down that surface water right holder just by simply adjusting the head gate or pulling a pump. And then that action keeps that senior water right whole and keeps that senior water right from being injured. That's not so much the case with a well. As we all know, when you pump water from a well, its effect on the stream is delayed. And so simply shutting off the well does not immediately provide water to that senior water right holder. And for that reason, you have to augment those depletions to assure you're not impacting and injuring that senior water right holder. So when a basin is not over appropriated, the state engineer can make a finding of no injury to the surface water right holders when issuing well permits. However, when a basin is over appropriated, the state engineer cannot make a finding of injury. And as such, the allowed uses under well permits is limited without a plan for augmentation. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I have made a request to the state engineer to designate the basin over appropriated, the one that I showed you earlier that was kind of in that yellow shaded area. In that request, I've written a lengthy report that's gone through evaluating many things, but I thought I would point out at least a handful of things that I've evaluated and looked at. One thing I've asked myself is, has there been a call on the river? And obviously, as I've indicated, yes, we have had a call both in 2018 and 2020. I also asked myself if there was other critical low flow years where a call could have happened, but for some reason it did not. And the answer to that question was yes. Again, as some of you may be aware, also there's been a lot of water released from our reservoirs, whether it's Stagecoach, Elkhead, and sometimes even Steamboat Lake, that was for non-consumptive purposes. And so I've gone through an evaluation of looking at what would the river have looked like if that non-consumptive storage release had not occurred, and just evaluated what the stream would have looked like without those inputs into the system. I've also looked at how much water has been appropriated in this basin. As you can imagine, we've had the issuance and we've decreed water rights here in this basin for over 120 years. And so we have a lot of water rights that have been decreed in this basin. And I've looked at those water rights, the quantity of those water rights, how much they're decreed for, and compared those to how much water is actually available in our streams. And then of course I've looked at things like what has changed over time that would warrant this designation. Things such as the number of new water right applications, changes in stream flows. We're fortunate enough to have a gauge at the Yampa River Maybelle gauge that has over 100 years of record. And we can see how over time flows in the Yampa River have declined. They've gone from about 1.5 million acre feet per year to 1.1 million acre feet per year. And then of course we've had the continuation of use of water through wells. So those are the things I evaluated. On this slide, but I've already talked about all these things, but I really want to hit some of these home to you. And, you know, the primary reason we look at designating a basin over appropriated is to protect senior water right holders from impacts of future groundwater development. The other thing I want to point out is who or what is affected, and it's really important to keep in mind that it's the issuance of well permits that is affected when a basin is designated over appropriated. And again, keep in mind that you can continue to pursue junior water right appropriations. So with that said, I'm pretty much going to wrap up with this last slide. And one thing I want to just point out is I really did purposely keep this presentation short. And the reason I kept this presentation short is the purpose of this meeting is public input. I really hope all of you can feel free to ask some questions as we go along here tonight. And I should have mentioned this up front. Please feel free to chat questions at any time. I know both Chris and Tracy are looking for any chats that might be coming through. And then here, like I said, this is my last slide. Feel free also to raise your hand or take yourself off mute if you want to verbally ask a question. So I encourage you to ask some questions here. So from this point forward, the state engineer will evaluate my request to designate the basin over appropriated. And if he determines that it is appropriate to designate this basin over appropriated, we will provide notice of this over appropriation through the substitute water supply plan notification list and other public notice. In this notice, the notice will provide the date upon which the basin will be considered over appropriated. For example, and this is just an example, the state engineer may decide that as of May 1st, 2021, the basin is considered over appropriated. At that point, well permitting will change. So once this notification goes out through the substitute water supply plan notification and other notification, people will have 30 days to provide comments on this and continue to ask questions. And I'm always available for people to give me a call or email me questions. So I do ask for people to do that.